She kept her ex on her phone until my new girl posted us, and suddenly it became a huge problem she couldn't ignore. My girlfriend kept a photo of her ex as her phone background because, according to her, it was just a good photo. So I kept my options open because they were good options. The second, another woman posted a picture of us together. Suddenly, that old beach photo was not so innocent anymore. That was when the double standard finally stopped being subtle and started staring me right in the face. My name is Luke. I was 28 at the time, working as a warehouse supervisor at a distribution center just outside Atlanta. It was not glamorous work, but it was honest, steady, and it paid enough for me to live comfortably. I owned a small two-bedroom ranch house I had bought 3 years earlier when the market dipped. Nothing fancy, just a simple place with a garage I had turned into a home gym. I was not rich, but I was stable. I paid my bills on time. I had a 401k. I had been with the same company for 6 years, and I had worked my way up from the loading dock to supervisor. The job was physically demanding, but it was straightforward. I showed up, managed the team, made sure shipments went out on schedule, and handled whatever crisis came up when equipment broke down or someone called in sick. I liked it because when I left work, I was done. I did not bring spreadsheets home. I did not answer emails all night. I clocked out and my time was mine. My girlfriend, Amber, was 26 and worked retail management at one of those mid-tier clothing stores in the mall. We had been together for about a year and a half when everything finally blew up. We met through mutual friends at a barbecue. She seemed cool. We hit it off. And for the first year or so, things were genuinely good. She moved into my place around 8 months into the relationship. Financially, it made sense for her because she had been paying way too much for a studio apartment across town. We split utilities and groceries, and I covered the mortgage because it was my house. It was a pretty standard arrangement, and at first it worked fine for both of us. The move-in process was smooth enough. She did not have much furniture, mostly clothes and personal items, so I cleared half the closet, gave her 2 dresser drawers, and made space for her in the bathroom. It felt natural at the time, like normal cohabitation. Her job at the mall meant irregular hours, lots of evenings and weekends, while I worked Monday through Friday from 7 to 3:30. Our schedules did not always line up, but we made it work. Sometimes she was leaving for work right when I got home. Sometimes I was already asleep by the time she finished a closing shift. On her days off, usually Tuesdays and Wednesdays, we would have breakfast together. She made these elaborate egg dishes with vegetables and cheese while I handled the coffee. We had our routine, and it felt comfortable. The first time I really noticed the phone background situation was around month 10. We were sitting on the couch watching some crime documentary when her phone lit up with a notification. On the screen was a photo of Amber standing on a beach at sunset, looking off into the distance. The lighting was perfect, almost professional. Honestly, she looked great in it. The whole composition was beautiful. Golden hour light, waves in the background, her hair caught by the wind in the middle of a soft movement, a flowy white dress, her face peaceful as she looked out at the ocean. It was the kind of picture that looked like it belonged in a travel magazine. Objectively, it was a beautiful image. I said, casually, "Nice photo. When was that taken?" She said, "Oh, that's from like 2 years ago. Good lighting, right? It's my favorite picture of myself." At the time, I thought, fair enough. Everybody has those pictures where everything just works. The lighting, the angle, the mood, all of it. I did not think much more about it. A few weeks later, we were at dinner with her friend Sophie, and the phone came up again. Sophie made some comment about Amber never changing her background and how she had kept the same picture forever. Amber laughed and said, "It's just such a good picture. The lighting is perfect. The composition is amazing. I look great in it. Why would I change it?" I glanced at her phone sitting on the table, and there it was again, the beach sunset photo. Something about the way they were talking about it felt slightly off, but I could not put my finger on why. Later that night, I asked her about it directly. I said, "So that beach photo, where was that taken?" She said, "California trip I took a while back." I asked, "Solo trip?" She hesitated just a fraction too long, just long enough for me to notice. Then she said, "No, I was with my ex. But that's not why I keep it. It's genuinely just a really good photo of me. The relationship is over. The photo is just a photo." And there it was. Her phone background was not just a nice picture from some random vacation. It was a picture taken by her ex-boyfriend on a romantic beach trip, not a group trip with friends, not a family vacation. A couple's trip from her previous relationship. I asked her, "That doesn't bother you?" She looked at me like I was the one being strange and said, Why would it? The relationship ended, but the photo is still good. It's not like I'm looking at him in the picture. It's just me. I said, yeah, but he took it on a romantic trip. That's kind of weird to keep as your phone background. She got defensive immediately. She said, you're being insecure. It's literally just a photo. Should I delete every picture from my past just because I'm with you now? I told her. I'm not saying delete it. I'm saying maybe don't have it as the first thing you see every time you check your phone. She said, you're making this into a bigger deal than it is. The photo has nothing to do with him. It's about me looking good in good lighting. We dropped it, but it stayed in the back of my mind. Not because I was some jealous guy who could not handle the fact that my girlfriend had a past. I had relationships before her too. I understood that adults have history, but there is a difference between acknowledging someone's past and actively displaying something from that past as the first image you see every single day. Over the next few months, I started noticing other things. She would get texts from a guy named Jake at weird hours. When I asked who Jake was, she said, just a friend from before, but his name came up a lot. Too much for someone who was supposedly just a friend. Texts came in at 10 or 11 at night, during dinner, during movies, while we were in the middle of conversations. She would check them immediately, sometimes typing quick responses while I was still talking. I would pause and wait for her attention, and she would look up and say, sorry, what were you saying? It started to feel like I was competing for attention with a guy I had never even met. One Tuesday morning, we were having breakfast when her phone buzzed 3 times in rapid succession. All 3 notifications were from Jake. She picked up the phone, smiled at whatever he had sent, and typed back while her eggs got cold. I said, must be some conversation. She said, just Jake being dumb. He sent me this meme about work stuff. I said, you guys talk about work a lot. She shrugged and said, sometimes. He gets it, you know. Retail management problems. I asked, where does he work? She hesitated again and said, different store. Same company, though. That felt like important information she had deliberately left out. They worked for the same company. They probably saw each other at district meetings, trainings, maybe even worked together directly at some point. I asked, so you see him at work? She said, sometimes. District meetings, training sessions, that kind of thing. I said, huh? She immediately snapped. Don't start. He's literally just a friend. But the texts kept coming. Morning, afternoon, night. There was this constant stream of communication with this friend from before, while I was lucky to get half her attention during dinner. One night, her phone was charging on the kitchen counter while she was in the shower. I did not go through it. I was not raised that way, and I was not interested in being that guy. But the screen lit up with a text from Jake, and the preview said, miss talking to you like we used to. I did not need to snoop to understand the pattern. The beach photo background, the constant texting, the defensive reaction whenever I brought any of it up, the way she framed my concerns as insecurity instead of actually caring about how it made me feel. I was not stupid. I could see what was happening. My buddy Carlos at work noticed I was off one day. We were doing inventory checks in the back warehouse when he asked what was eating at me. I told him, girl problems. I'm pretty sure my girlfriend is hung up on her ex. He asked, she say that? I said, not in those words. But her phone background is a photo he took of her. They text all the time, and she gets defensive when I mention any of it. Carlos gave this low whistle and said, man, that's disrespectful. My wife tried something like that early on. I shut it down quick. You can have a past, but you don't display it. I told him, she says I'm being insecure. He said, no, you're being normal. She's testing boundaries. She's seeing what you'll put up with. That conversation stuck with me. Carlos had been married for 10 years and seemed to have his relationship figured out. Maybe he was right. Maybe Amber was not confused at all. Maybe she was just finding out how much disrespect I would accept if she wrapped it in the word insecure. So I decided to run an experiment. If Amber could keep her options open by staying in contact with her ex and literally looking at a photo from their relationship every day, then I could keep my options open too. Not by cheating, not by sneaking around or crossing physical lines, just by not closing myself off to other possibilities while she clearly refused to close herself off to hers. I started small. I reconnected with some female friends I had lost touch with. I accepted friend requests from women I had ignored before. I started conversations at the gym, at the grocery store, and at work functions. Nothing inappropriate, just being social, just being available. There was a woman named Diana who worked in the front office at my company. We had said hello in passing before, but we had never really talked. She was attractive, around my age, and seemed cool. One day, I stopped by her desk to ask about some paperwork, and we ended up talking for 20 minutes. She was funny, easy to talk to, and at no point during our conversation did she mention her ex or have his photo as her phone background. That first real conversation happened on a Thursday afternoon. I needed to file incident reports after one of the guys hurt his back lifting wrong. Diana handled the safety paperwork for the facility. She pulled up the digital templates and said, "These forms are a pain. Administration loves their bureaucracy." I said, "Tell me about it." "Last month they made us retake forklift certification, even though we've all been driving them for years." She laughed and said, "Oh, I remember that memo. Pretty sure half the warehouse guys were cursing my name." I said, "No, we save our cursing for the people who write the policies, not the people stuck enforcing them." She smiled and said, "I appreciate that. You'd be surprised how many people shoot the messenger." We talked while she filled out the forms. She told me she had been with the company about 2 years and had transferred from a different facility across the state. She said she moved to Atlanta for a fresh start after a bad breakup. I asked, "How's Atlanta treating you?" She said, "Better than expected. I'm still figuring out where everything is, but the people are nice." I said, "Have you found any good restaurants yet? That's like half the battle of moving somewhere new." Her eyes lit up. She said, "Actually, I've been looking for recommendations. Everything I've tried so far has been chains." I gave her a few spots I liked. Nothing fancy, just solid local places with good food. She pulled out her phone to take notes, and I noticed that her background was just a generic nature scene. No ex, no romantic vacation, no unresolved history glowing on the lock screen. After that, Diana and I started having lunch together occasionally, just coworkers being friendly. She would tell me about her weekend plans, and I would tell her about mine. Sometimes Amber came up in conversation. Sometimes she did not. The lunches became a regular thing, usually Wednesdays, sometimes Fridays if our schedules lined up. We would go to different food trucks that parked near the industrial complex and try whatever looked good. One Saturday, we met at this Ethiopian restaurant in Little Five Points. The place was small, authentic, and packed with people. We ordered a combo platter and ate with injera bread. Diana took one bite and said, "This is incredible. Why did nobody tell me about this place?" I said, "Maybe they wanted to keep it a secret." We talked for 2 hours about her life before Atlanta, about my path from loading docks to supervisor, about our families, our goals, and our completely different taste in music. The conversation felt easy. I did not have to fight for her attention. I did not have to repeat myself, because she had stopped listening to answer a text. She was just present. At home, nothing with Amber changed. The beach photo still glowed on her phone screen. Jake still texted at all hours. Amber still insisted none of it meant anything and that I was overreacting. Whenever I brought up Jake, she said, "You're being paranoid. He's literally just a friend. We have history, but that's all it is. History." I said, "History, that you keep looking at on your phone every single day." She said, "Oh my gosh, let it go already. The photo is staying. If you can't handle that, maybe you're too insecure for a relationship." That line right there was the moment I really heard what she was doing. Too insecure for a relationship. It was classic manipulation. Take a normal boundary, turn it into a character flaw, and make the other person feel like they are the problem for noticing disrespect. I did not argue anymore. I did not beg her to change it. I just stopped engaging with it. If she wanted to keep that photo, fine. I would keep my options open. Diana and I started hanging out outside of work. Coffee before shifts. Lunch on weekends when we both had time. She mentioned that she had gotten out of a relationship a few months earlier and was not looking for anything serious. She said she just enjoyed having someone to talk to. During one of our coffee meetups, I asked what happened with her ex. She said, "He couldn't let go of his previous relationship. He kept comparing me to her. He kept talking about her. He had all these photos of them together still around his apartment. It was exhausting." I said, "Sounds familiar." She asked if I was going through something similar, so I told her about Amber's phone background. Diana actually laughed, not in a cruel way, but in that way people laugh when something is absurdly familiar. She said, "That's wild. My ex did the same thing. He said it was just a good photo." Like, yeah, it's a good photo of you from a romantic trip with someone else. Read the room. It felt good to talk to someone who understood it immediately, someone who did not make me feel unreasonable for having basic standards. Diana and I did not cross any physical lines. No kissing, no touching, nothing that would technically qualify as cheating, but we definitely had chemistry. The kind of easy back and forth that makes you realize maybe you are with the wrong person. About 3 months into my friendship with Diana, we went hiking at a state park about an hour outside the city. It was a beautiful day, clear sky, good trails, just two friends hanging out. The drive up was fun because Diana insisted on controlling the music and subjected me to country songs about heartbreak and redemption. She sang along to every word completely off key, and she had no shame about it. The hike itself was moderate, about 3 miles up to the summit, with enough elevation to make you work for it. Diana kept pace easily and talked about work drama the whole way. When we reached the top, the view was incredible. The city spread out below us, the sky bright and blue above us. Diana pulled out her phone and said, "Get in here," pulling me into frame. We took a few photos together, nothing romantic, just two people smiling at the camera with a mountain view behind them. She checked the pictures, nodded in approval, and put her phone away. On the way back down, we talked about relationships. Diana told me more about her ex, how controlling he had been, how he always needed to know where she was, how he slowly made her feel trapped even though he claimed everything he did was out of love. She said, "That's not love, that's ownership." It took me way too long to figure out the difference. After the hike, we grabbed food and sat in the parking lot eating and talking until sunset. It was easy. No pressure, no games, no tension hiding under every conversation. That night, Diana posted one of the hiking photos to her Instagram. She tagged me and captioned it, "Great hike with great company." I did not think much of it. Amber and I followed each other on social media, but we barely interacted there. She almost never liked my posts. I almost never liked hers. It was just one of those things where we were connected online but did not use it much with each other. Apparently, though, Amber noticed that post. The next day, I was at work when my phone started blowing up. Text after text from Amber. "Who is Diana? Why are you hiking with other women? This is so disrespectful. We need to talk right now. Answer me. I can't believe you would do this to me. You're unbelievable." The messages kept coming. I silenced my phone and finished my shift. I had a whole truckload of inventory to check in, and I was not about to let relationship drama mess with my workday. I figured I would let her sit with it for a few hours. Maybe she would calm down by the time I got home. She did not calm down. When I walked in, Amber was sitting on the couch with her arms crossed and her face set in that expression that meant a fight was already waiting for me. Before I had even put my keys down, she said, "Want to explain that photo?" I asked. "Which photo?" She snapped. "Don't play dumb. The hiking photo with that woman, Diana," I said. "Oh, that. We went hiking yesterday." "She's a friend from work," Amber said. "A friend? Since when do you go on romantic hikes with friends?" I almost laughed at the irony, but I kept my voice calm. I said, "It wasn't romantic. We hiked as friends. People do that." She said, "You were all over each other in that photo." I pulled up the picture on my phone. We were standing beside each other, both smiling at the camera, with probably 6 inches of space between us. All over each other was a massive exaggeration. I said, "We were taking a photo at the summit. It's a standard hiking photo. There's nothing inappropriate about it," she said. "It is completely inappropriate. You're in a relationship. You shouldn't be going on dates with other women," I said. "It wasn't a date, and even if it was, I'm just keeping my options open like you do with Jake." Her face went red immediately. She said, "That is completely different." I asked, "How?" She said, "Jake is just a friend. We have history. You're literally seeing someone else behind my back." I sat down on the couch and kept my voice steady. I said, "Let me get this straight. You can text your ex at all hours, keep a photo he took of you on a romantic trip as your phone background, and that's fine because it's just history, and I'm insecure if I have a problem with it. But I go hiking with a female coworker, and suddenly, I'm the bad guy?" She said, "Yes, because I'm not interested in Jake romantically. You're clearly interested in this Diana person." I said, "And you're clearly still hung up on Jake. At least I'm honest about it." Amber shot back, "I am not hung up on Jake. How many times do I have to say it? We're friends. That's it." I said, "Then change your phone background." Silence. She just stared at me. I said, "That's what I thought. You won't change it because it means something to you. That photo, that relationship, Jake himself, all of it still means something. And you want to keep that door open while demanding I close every other door in my life." She said, "This is insane. You're deflecting. This is not about my phone. This is about you cheating." I said, "I'm not cheating. I went hiking with a friend. We took a photo. That's it." She said, "Then why did she post it?" Why did she tag you? She's trying to stake a claim, I said. Or she posted a photo from a fun day like people do. You're reading way too much into it, Amber snapped. No, you're reading too much into my friendship with Jake. You're the one who's been weird about this from the start. We went in circles for another hour. She insisted Diana was a threat and that I was betraying her. I kept pointing out the double standard. Neither of us budged. Finally, I asked the question that ended the argument. I said, "Do you love Jake?" She froze. Just for a second, but long enough. She said, "That's not fair." I said, "Answer the question." She said, "I care about him, but not like that. Not anymore. We had something once, but it's over." I asked, "But do you still love him?" She said, "Stop putting words in my mouth." I said, "Then answer. Do you love Jake? Yes or no?" She said, "It's not that simple." I said, "It really is. Either you're over him or you're not. Either this relationship is your priority or it isn't. Which is it?" She stood up and grabbed her phone, and that beach sunset photo lit up her angry face. She said, "I need some air. This is too much." Then she walked out. She came back 3 hours later and acted like nothing happened. I did not bring it up again that night, but something had shifted. For the first time, I was not the one scrambling to explain myself. I was not the one on defense. The tables had turned, and Amber did not know how to handle it. Over the next few weeks, she became obsessed with Diana. She constantly checked my phone when she thought I was not looking. She asked where I was going, who I was with, what time I would be back, and whether Diana would be there. It was the exact behavior she had called controlling and insecure when I showed any concern about Jake. Diana and I kept hanging out, still just friends, but I will not pretend the possibility of more was not there. We clicked in a way Amber and I had not clicked in months, maybe ever. Conversations flowed naturally. There were no games, no double standards, no fighting for basic respect. One Saturday, Diana invited me to an outdoor concert in the park. Local bands, food trucks, good weather. I mentioned it to Amber in passing. She said, "You're going to a concert with her?" I said, "Yeah. It should be fun. You can come if you want." I knew she would not. Amber hated crowds and live music. She said, "I can't believe you're doing this. You're throwing our relationship away for some random woman you barely know." I said, "I've known Diana for 4 months. We work together. We're friends. This isn't throwing anything away." She said, "It is when you're choosing her over me." I said, "I'm not choosing anyone over anyone. I'm going to a concert with a friend. You're welcome to join." Amber said, "I shouldn't have to join. You should want to spend time with me, not her." I said, "I spend plenty of time with you. I'm allowed to have friends," she said, "not friends who are clearly trying to steal you away." The concert was great. Diana and I got food truck tacos, watched a few local bands, and sat on a blanket in the grass. It was friendly, relaxed, and nothing inappropriate happened. But something shifted in me that day. I realized I had been happier with Diana for a few hours than I had been with Amber in months. On the way back to her car, Diana asked, "What's going on with you and Amber?" I said, "Honestly, I'm not sure anymore. Things have been weird." She asked, "The phone background thing?" I said, "That's part of it. But it's bigger than that. It's the double standards, the manipulation, the way she wants me to accept her, staying connected to her ex while freaking out if I have female friends." Diana said, "That sounds exhausting." I said, "It is." We sat in her car for a while and just talked. She told me about her last relationship and how her ex had slowly isolated her from friends until she felt trapped. She said leaving him had been the hardest and best decision she had ever made. Then she said, "I'm not saying you should break up with Amber. That's your call. But from an outside perspective, it doesn't sound healthy. You deserve someone who respects you." I did not have a good answer because I knew she was right. That night, I came home and found that Amber had cooked dinner. Candles on the table, nice music playing, the whole romantic setup. She was trying, or at least trying to look like she was trying. The house smelled amazing. Something Italian. She had set the table with the good plates and filled wine glasses with something red. She came out wearing a dress I had complimented months earlier, with her hair done and her makeup perfect. I asked, "What's all this?" She said, "I've been thinking about us, about what you said. I don't want to lose you." She had made chicken parmesan from scratch, plus my favorite garlic bread and salad. It must have taken hours. We sat down to eat, and it really was a nice meal. She had clearly followed a recipe and cooked everything well. I told her honestly, "This is really good." She said, "Thanks." I wanted to do something special, but the whole time, her phone sat on the table, that beach photo glowing every time a notification came in. It happened 3 times during dinner, all from Jake. She glanced at each one, then looked back at me with a forced smile. She did not answer them, but she was clearly aware of every message. She was sitting across from me during a dinner she had made to save our relationship, and her attention still belonged partly to him. We finished eating, and she brought out dessert, cheesecake from the fancy bakery across town. She said again, "I've been thinking. I don't want to lose you," I said. "Then we need to talk about the actual issues." She said, "I know, and I'm ready to work on things." She picked up her phone and stared at it. For 1 second, I thought she was actually going to change the background right there. I thought maybe that would be the gesture that showed she finally understood. Instead, she set the phone back down and said, "I can text Jake less, and I'll be less weird about your friends." "That's fair, right?" I asked. "What about the photo?" She sighed and said, "Can we not do this right now? I made this nice dinner." "I'm trying here," I said. "You're trying, but you're not actually changing anything. You'll text Jake less and trust me more with friends, but the photo stays," she said. "Why is it such a big deal? It's literally just a picture," I said, "because it represents everything wrong with this relationship. You keep one foot in your past while demanding I have both feet in our present." Her phone buzzed again. "Jake." She looked at it, looked back at me, then picked it up, read the message, and smiled slightly. Then she said, "Sorry, what were you saying?" That was when I knew. The candles, the dinner, the dress, the cheesecake, none of it mattered if she could not put down her phone for one serious conversation about us. She started crying and said, "I don't know how to make you happy anymore. Nothing I do is good enough." I said, "I'm sleeping in the spare bedroom tonight." I went to the spare room, locked the door, and lay there listening. I heard her crying for a while. Then I heard her on the phone, probably talking to Jake. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Diana. "Hope last night wasn't too rough. Coffee before work?" I replied. "Definitely." The next few weeks were tense. Amber and I were more like roommates than a couple. She would sit on the couch on her phone, and I would be in the garage working out. She would watch TV in the living room, and I would scroll on my phone in another room. We still lived in the same house. We sometimes still slept in the same bed. But emotionally, we were barely together anymore. Diana and I got closer. Still no physical line crossed, but emotionally, we were definitely more than friends. We talked every day. We saw each other multiple times a week. We knew details about each other's lives that went beyond surface-level friendship. I knew it was not fair to Amber, but it also was not fair that Amber demanded all my attention while constantly giving hers somewhere else. Two wrongs do not make a right, but sometimes they make things even enough for the truth to come out. The breaking point came on a random Tuesday. I got home from work and found Amber in the bedroom packing a bag. I asked, "What's going on?" She said, "I'm staying at my mom's for a few days. I need to think." She was throwing clothes into an overnight bag without folding them, just grabbing things from drawers and stuffing them in. Her movements were sharp and frustrated, like she was angry at the clothes for existing. I asked, "Think about what?" She said, "About us. About whether this is worth fighting for." I leaned against the doorframe and watched her pack. Part of me wanted to stop her, to say we could figure it out. But the bigger part of me was tired. Tired of the double standards. Tired of competing for her attention. Tired of being made to feel crazy for having normal boundaries. So I said, "Okay, take the time you need." She stopped packing and looked at me with surprise, like she had expected me to beg her to stay. She said, "That's it? You're just going to let me leave?" I asked. "What do you want me to say, Amber?" "I've been trying to talk about our issues for months. You shut me down every time. If you need space to think, take it," she said. "Don't you care that I'm leaving?" I said, "Of course I care, but I'm not going to force someone to stay who doesn't want to be here." She went back to packing more aggressively and slammed a drawer after pulling out a sweater. She said, "You're unbelievable. I'm the one trying to save this relationship, and you're just giving up." I asked, "How are you saving it? By leaving? By refusing to change anything?" She said, "I offered to compromise." I said, "You offered to text Jake slightly less while keeping him as your priority. That's not a compromise. That's an insult." She zipped up her bag and turned to face me. She asked, "Are you seeing Diana?" I said, "We're friends." She said, "That's not what I asked." The moment felt significant, like we had finally reached the point where honesty was the only option left. I could have lied. I could have dragged it out longer. but I was tired of half-truths. I said, "No, I'm not seeing her. But if you asked if I wanted to, I don't know what I'd say." Her face went pale, and her eyes started shining with tears. For a second, she just stood there, holding her bag and processing it. Then she nodded slowly, jaw clenched, and said, "At least you're honest." I asked her the same question I had asked weeks earlier. "Are you still in love with Jake?" This time, she could not dodge it. We had reached the point where lies did not work anymore. She set down her bag, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at her hands for a long moment. When she finally looked up, her eyes were wet. She said, "I don't know. Maybe I never stopped." The admission hung in the air between us. Everything I had suspected for months was finally confirmed. I said quietly, "Then that's your answer." She said, "I don't want to love him. I want to love you. You're stable and responsible, and you have your life together. You're the smart choice." I gave a dry laugh and said, "The smart choice? That's romantic." She said, "You know what I mean. Jake is chaos. He's unpredictable and flaky and probably terrible husband material. But there's this history there. This pull. I thought moving in with you would make it go away. I thought building a life with someone reliable would be enough. But it's not. I don't know." She stood and started pacing. She said, "That's why I need space. I need to figure out what I want. Who I want." I said, "You shouldn't need space to figure that out, Amber. If you loved me, if you really wanted this, there wouldn't be a question. The fact that you're torn between me and him tells you everything you need to know." She asked, "So what? We're just done? After 18 months? You're walking away?" I said, "You're the one leaving. I'm just accepting it." She grabbed her bag and hesitated at the door. She said, "I'll call you in a few days after I've had time to think." I said, "Don't bother. I think we both know how this ends." She said, "Stop being so stubborn. I'm trying to make this work." I said, "No, you're trying to keep both options open while you decide who's the better deal. I'm not interested in being on the auction block." Then she left. I heard her car pull out of the driveway. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the empty room and trying to process what had just happened. My phone buzzed. It was Diana. She wrote, "Everything okay? You seemed off today." I replied, "Long story. Can we talk?" She answered, "My place or yours?" I said, "Yours?" She wrote, "I'll bring food." I showed up at Diana's apartment with Chinese takeout and told her the whole story. Everything from the phone background to Jake, from the hiking photo to the dinner, from the fight to Amber admitting she might never have stopped loving him. Diana listened without interrupting, just nodding as I spoke. When I finished, she asked, "So, what are you going to do?" I said, "Honestly, I think it's over. It's probably been over for a while. It just took me this long to admit it." She asked, "How do you feel about that?" I said, relieved. Sad. Both. I don't know. We had good times, but there was always this undercurrent of tension. This feeling that we were competing for each other's attention, instead of actually being partners. Diana reached over and squeezed my hand. She said, "You deserve better than that." I said, "So do you. Your ex sounds like he was a nightmare." She said, "He was. But he taught me what I don't want." Sometimes the wrong relationship shows you exactly what the right one should look like. We talked until midnight. When I stood up to leave, she walked me to the door. Before I left, she said, "For what it's worth, I think you're making the right choice. And when you're ready, if you ever want to see what we could be beyond friends, I'd like that." I looked at her and said, "Yeah, I would too." I drove home feeling lighter than I had in months. Amber's car was not in the driveway. The house was empty, quiet, and peaceful. My phone lit up with a text from her. "Can we talk tomorrow?" I replied, "Sure." "What time?" She said, "After work. I'll come by around 6. She showed up exactly at 6 the next day. We sat in the living room with that weird formality between two people who used to be close and were now treating each other like strangers. She started by saying, "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about Jake, and I think you're right. I wasn't over him when we started dating. I thought I was, but seeing him again, having him back in my life, it brought up all these old feelings." I said, "I appreciate you being honest." She said, "But I want to work on it. On us. I can cut off contact with Jake completely. I can change my phone background. Whatever you need." There it was. The offer I had wanted months earlier. Complete surrender on every point we had fought over. And by then, it meant almost nothing. I said, "I don't think that's the solution." She looked confused and asked, "Why not? I'm giving you everything you asked for." I said, because you should want to do those things, not do them because you have to. The fact that it took me potentially moving on for you to even consider changing shows the real issue. You don't respect me or this relationship. You want the security I provide while keeping your options open. And when I did the same thing, you lost your mind. She said, that's not fair. I was trying. I cooked dinner. I offered to change things. I said, after months of dismissing my concerns and calling me insecure, after I had already mentally checked out. It's too little. Too late. She started crying and asked, so that's it? You're just giving up? I said, I'm not giving up. I'm accepting reality. We're not right for each other. You need someone who's okay with you maintaining close friendships with exes. I need someone who makes me a priority. Those needs are not compatible. She asked, what about Diana? Are you going to be with her now? I said, maybe. Maybe not. That's not really the point, she said. It's exactly the point. You're leaving me for her. I shook my head and said, I'm leaving because this relationship doesn't work. Diana has nothing to do with it. She just helped me see what I was missing. Mutual respect. Trust. Someone who wants to be with me, not just someone who wants what I provide. We sat in silence for a few minutes. Finally, Amber stood up and said, I'll start looking for a new place. It might take a few weeks, I said. Take your time. I'm not trying to kick you out. She paused and asked, can I ask you something? If I had changed that phone background at the beginning, would we have made it? I thought about it honestly. Then I said, maybe. But probably not. The background was just a symptom. The real problem was deeper than that. She nodded, picked up her bag, and went to the bedroom. I stayed on the couch, staring at the wall and processing the end of 18 months. 2 weeks later, Amber moved into a new apartment across town. We split our shared belongings without much drama. She took her furniture. I kept mine. We settled utilities and groceries. The whole thing was surprisingly civil for a breakup. On the day she moved out, I found myself staring at my own phone background. It was just a generic landscape photo that came preloaded with the phone. Nothing personal, nothing meaningful, just a placeholder. I changed it to a photo of me and Diana from the concert. Just two people smiling, genuinely happy, with no baggage and no hidden meanings. It felt like a good fresh start. Diana and I started officially dating about a month after Amber left. We took it slow at first because both of us were still gun-shy from previous relationships, but it was different from the start. Easy, natural, no games, no double standards, no competing for attention, no one keeping a door cracked open to someone from the past while demanding full loyalty from the person in the present. About 3 months into being official with Diana, I ran into Amber at the grocery store. She was with a guy I did not recognize. Not Jake. Someone new. She said awkwardly. Hey, how are you? I said, good. You? She said, really good, actually. This is Scott. We made small talk for a few minutes. Scott seemed nice enough. A normal guy. Nothing dramatic. And Amber looked happy. Before I walked away, I said, I'm glad you're doing well. She said, you too. And Luke? I'm sorry for everything. You were right about most of it. I said, water under the bridge. Take care of yourself. Then I finished my shopping and went home. Diana was waiting at my place because we had planned to try a new recipe for dinner. I found her in the kitchen already prepping ingredients, relaxed and smiling, completely present. Looking back, the phone background thing seemed silly on the surface. It was just a phone screen, just pixels arranged in a certain way. But it was never really about the picture. It was about what the picture represented. It represented someone choosing to display her connection to the past every single day while asking me to erase any sign that I had options, boundaries, or a life outside her. It represented a relationship where one person wanted permission for everything and accountability for nothing. And once I finally saw that clearly, I stopped fighting over the photo and started paying attention to the bigger picture.